This conference will now be recorded.
And welcome everybody. This is a different meeting in certain ways. First of all, as some of you have obviously realized, we're not on the second Tuesday, we're on the third Tuesday, and the next meeting will be on the fifth Tuesday. And that's because if you look at the calendar, you would have the second Tuesday followed the first Monday, and that meant you would have been listening to myself and Len and Jake 2 nights on the trot, and we doubted that anybody wanted that. So we had to make some adjustments, and so we just moved the meeting. The other effect of that is that we will probably need to finish by about quarter to whatever the time, whatever your local time is. In my case, it's going to be 4:45, 7:45, Mackie.
You know, according to the calendar, Rick, that the Caregivers doesn't start until 8:30.
No, 8 o'clock.
It is 8 o'clock. Okay.
It was 8 o'clock. So the only meeting that we have that starts at 8:30 is the multiple sclerosis meeting. Everything else starts at 8 or earlier. So we will stop in enough time to close and reopen the meeting. The other thing that makes this meeting different, and certainly for me sad, is that it's the first meeting we've had since we lost Professor Bill. And Bill was a very special person to me. I first connected with him on Inspire. And I can't remember when, but my guess is it was around 2014. And we went back and forth for quite some time. We got into some issues and some debates, and eventually we got to talk to each other, and we became really good friends. And most of you know that, if not all of you who are on this call, but I don't know, well, Dennis Mcguire may not be so aware of this, but some of the people who are listening may also not be aware that Bill was a cancer researcher by profession, and probably because he had a lot of cancer in his family. I was talking to Buzz, his older brother, yesterday, and 6 of his mother came from a big family, and 6 of the siblings had cancer. There was only 1 that did not, which is quite remarkable, really. To some extent, I find it interesting that Bill never tested for BRCA until after he got diagnosed. But it's the old story of the cobbler that has holes in his shoes. And I'm sure that Bill was plenty aware of the risks that he was subject to. But he perhaps didn't want to deal with them. I never asked him that question, so I don't know. I know that Buzz and he had discussed it. I also know that Buzz has decided that he doesn't want to get tested for BRCA because, as he says, what would I do differently if I was? And he doesn't believe in testing. He's also a scientist, an animal scientist, and has a PhD. So you have to respect that, and I certainly agree that as far as medical treatment is concerned, there's not much point in doing a test if it's not going to change your course of actions and your course of treatment. So,
Do you know? Do you know if Bill, according to his obituary, Bill had lost a sister and a brother? Do you know if they had also died of cancer? Do you know?
His sister died of ovarian cancer. His brother died in a car accident.
Oh, okay.
His brother died. His younger brother. He had three younger brothers, and one of them, Jan, was in a car accident. So what I wanted to say was that there can be very few cancer researchers who benefited directly from their own research, especially since they didn't even know they were going to benefit from their research. But Bill certainly did. And as most of you know, he was working with olaparib long before he knew he was BRCA positive. And it was only because he took the olaparib to his tumor board, who really weren't that familiar with PARP inhibitors, and said, I want to try this. I've got some in the lab. And he convinced them. He made a presentation to his tumor board that they agreed to allow him to start olaparib. I think this was back around 2014 or 2015. I'm not exactly sure when. And he got a good 2 years out of that olaparib. And then again, later on, I want to say just last year, I don't know, I could look at my notes, it's not important though, when he went to see Atish Chowdhury at Dana-Farber, and he really liked Atish because Atish was very much, even though he was a doctor, he was very much more a researcher than he was a clinician. And Bill identified with him very well. And then it turned out that the trial, which was for an ATM inhibitor together with olaparib, utilized pathways that Bill's lab had discovered. And so, of course, Bill became a big celebrity at Dana-Farber. And I don't know if any of you have follow us. I hope you will follow us on Twitter if you do have a Twitter account. But if you do, you will have seen that Atish Chowdhury paid a very nice tribute to Bill on there. I should read it. I'll read it to you in case you haven't seen it. This was in response to a post that I put up about Bill a couple of days ago. And he said that Dr. Chowdhury said it was truly an honor to care for Dr. Burhans, and I continue to use his research and his experience to guide my own research efforts moving forward, which is a really wonderful thing to say. And I know, I'm absolutely certain Bill would have been completely chuffed with having somebody say that about treating him and working with him. Bill was pretty courageous in his treatment because his urinary tract was absolutely destroyed through radiation. I don't know anybody who has suffered as much damage as Bill suffered. He postulated that was because every one of the cells in his body carried this BRCA mutation, and that this mismatch repair made his cells more likely to radiation damage than a normal person. And I've heard other people say the same thing. I've heard other doctors say the same thing. I don't think that's been proven. It's still a hypothesis. But if it ever is proven, we can all say we heard it here first. But the result of that was that Bill pretty much catheterized from 2013-14 onwards, and he suffered chronic UTIs that were excruciatingly painful. and he was frequently hospitalized for those urinary tract infections. And in fact, I think it was part of the reason why he decided in about 3 years ago to have an intrathecal pain pump installed, which did make his life a lot easier, because it allowed him to survive and to live a decent quality of life with a lot less opiates than he had been when he was taking the opiates either by pill or by injection or however he was doing it. So he suffered a lot more than most of us have had to suffer with this disease, and he bore it very bravely. And his philosophy was always that he didn't want to be a burden. He was happy to take everybody else's burdens, but he didn't want to burden anybody else. Buzz says because he had such a rough experience looking after his mother when he was a kid, and he didn't want to be a burden on anybody else. And that kind of reflected very much in how he lived his life and how he lived his close family life with his wife and his two offspring. There's not a lot else that I want to add other than that I will miss him a great deal. I definitely plan on going to the memorial, which is on November 16th in Buffalo. I have a feeling it'll be very well attended. He was very well liked and he was very well respected at Roswell Park. And I think there'll be a lot of people there. I did talk to Buzz yesterday about the fact that in the published obituary, prostate cancer wasn't even mentioned. And that did upset me a great amount, and I think it would have upset Bill too. I just can't explain it. In a month, in an environment where breast cancer is ever present, and then in the month of October when everything is pink, the fact that we cannot acknowledge that prostate cancer is a killer is very sad to me. And I think it would have been sad to Bill too, given how committed he was to educating others about this disease and about the impact of BRCA on men as much as on women. So what I would like to do at this point is just throw it open to anybody else that would like to say anything about Bill, and then we'll take as much time as we need, and then we'll move on into the regular meeting. So as often as my wont, I'll turn it over to Len first, and then to Jake, and as my co-moderators, and then we'll go to the rest of you. So, Len, what would you like to say?
You've said it so well, Rick. There's not much I can add. Bill was a wonderful person, very warm, and so easy to talk to. And Larry and I spent a couple of months with Bill working on the PowerPoint document that instructs people on how to use the clinicaltrials.gov website. It was virtually complete with just a few minor changes that needed to be made over a year ago. And I kept trying to get Bill to, because he mostly led the project, and I was trying to get him to make those final changes so that we could publish it. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I promise I'll get to it," but he never did. He had so much going on. So certainly, I'll send it over to Larry. I made the changes I wanted Bill to make, and that Bill wanted to make himself. And if it's okay with Larry and with Rick, I'll pass it by you, Rick. We'll put it on the website. But yeah, he'll be very sorely missed. Just a wonderful human being. Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, what Rick and Len have said is pretty much spot on. I would just like to add to give you a measure of the man from my own personal experience with him. He was in hospice. He knew he had less than 6 months to live. He hoped he'd have 6 months, but it turns out he had much less than that. But, I would call him periodically and ask him, how you doing, Bill? And he'd say, I'm okay. I'm feeling good. How are you, Jake? He always turned it right around onto me. He wanted to know how I was doing. Even though he's in a hospice dying, he's worrying about me. And on top of that, and this, I'll never forget this, he took time out of his own, and he had a lot of things he wanted to do. He wanted to work on a book. He had his own issues with pain and everything else. And he took time out to call my doctor, my oncologist, and to talk to her. I don't know for how long. Something that very few people have ever done or would do, and he did it for me. And it just means the world to me. Sorry.
Okay, Jake. It's okay. I mean, I think we all feel exactly the same way that you do. It's hard to speak about Bill and not to choke up.
Can I just follow up on what Len was saying? Or you want to hold on?
Please do.
So, really, it was such a pleasure for me to actually have them pick up this idea and to work together as a triumvirate. I called it, to try to put this PowerPoint, but Bill did the heavy lifting. He put the PowerPoint together, basically. We discussed it periodically. And I think what Len or I felt was we didn't really bring it up much or with the group or talk about it. I felt out of respect that we really couldn't go forward with anything while Bill was still possibly available to take a look. And I spoke to Len kind of recently, and Len said, maybe we'll try to pick up on this and try to get something out. It would be an honor to Bill, and it's basically his work. So I hope, Len, we can work on that and get that going with your approval, Rick. Anyway, really gonna miss him. That's all.
Thank you, Larry. And of course, we'd love to see that. And I don't think there's any question that we will acknowledge that all the three of you worked on it, but dedicate it to Professor Bill. Jake, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, that was it, Rick. You pretty much summarized the man, and those are some personal things with me that meant a lot to me. And
okay.
One thing I should have mentioned, Rick, that any of us who've ever spoken to Bill would agree, I'm sure, is that what was striking about him being such an accomplished researcher was his humility.
Mm-hmm.
Very humble man.
Yeah.
And, he never, there are some people who, if they have their degrees and their positions, they like to constantly remind you of it, laud it over you, but that was never the case with Bill. Very humble man.
So let me throw it open. Who else would like to add their homage?
And of course, Bill helped me out a great deal. Very long, it's been a couple of months, but we have very similar diagnoses, and I was very anxious get as much information out of him as I possibly could. And Rick, as you know, I pretty detailed email, which he had said, yes, I'll do, and who was never able to do that. Because I'm also BRCA2 positive. I've been on the LAPR for about 6 months, and I haven't had any radiation at this point. My journey has been a little over a year and a half, and on the LAPR now with the non-existent. A couple of questions that I had hoped to get answered from Bill, and understanding no two of us are the same exactly, but he and I were very close in our diagnoses, as I said, both being BRCA2 positive, both of us having 2 daughters, each of our daughters unfortunately being BRCA2 positive. And my questions to one of the biggest questions I had was, well, would you have done anything differently in your journey? Some things that you might recommend, and as you alluded to, Rick, as far as radiation and being BRCA, and ask fully if it should come a point where radiation recommended, and I think I'm going to be leery about that. And do a little bit more research on my own in relation to that. So, and also I've had, I think also Bill had shared with me, he also, I assume it was the Provenge, which is the only one that's really available for prostate cancer. I also had a prostatectomy. I don't recall if he had surgery as well. But just so many similarities that I hope to get some guidance, more guidance than he would provide. Again, he was very helpful to me while he was, as we all know, he was a very sharing person and looking to help everyone else. Just like that's why we're all on this call, right? Because we want to be able to help each other, and this is a support group for each one of us who participates. So I will definitely miss his guidance. I wish, we all had more time, and we all have more time, and I wish he had more time to be able to contribute more. I know he was saying he was going to start to work on a book. I guess that probably never really happened. I was looking, but that's about it. Can you tell me, is his wife been very much involved? I don't think she's spoken at this forum, or maybe she might in the future, but Rick, is that something that's a possibility?
I don't think so. Has she been involved? Yes, she has been somewhat involved. She was, of course, supportive of Bill. And I think she's sort of been obviously quite involved in the BRCA issues because of his kids. I doubt that Deb will come on this forum, but maybe she's always welcome if she ever does. Anyone else?
Obviously, it's too soon now to even think about it.
Yeah. Anyone else like to add anything to regarding Bill?
The funny thing is, I don't really have any. Again, this is Ken Anderson, but I don't really have any I don't recall of any direct communication with Bill on my side. I'm not sure why, but I was, because of the work that I've been doing towards kind of assembling this web. I don't know exactly. It's kind of like a chart to track activity on our social media. And I've been working on it the last 2 weeks, but one of the thoughts that I had to gather data was to go back and look at sorry, to go back and look at past recordings. And I'll just say that he was compassionate.
Yeah, yeah, he was very compassionate. I think that was probably the essence of Bill. And I think he was not only exceptionally compassionate in how he dealt with us, his peers in his disease, but certainly with his family and his immediate family, that was his trademark. And yeah, I mean, you know, we will miss his compassion. Yeah, and he was always full of gratitude. Whenever I spoke to him, he always expressed huge amount of gratitude for the support that we all provided him. And you should know that. I mean, his interactions, not just with Len and myself, but he really valued talking to everybody on this call, in this group, and the support that he got from them. It was very significant, and I think it eased his journey. I'm sure it eased his journey. Who else? Anybody else like to say anything before I just have a quick closing comment to make?
Rest in peace, Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jake. So Bill was essentially a Vermonter. He wasn't born in Vermont, but he was certainly raised and educated in Vermont, and lived a good portion of his life, even some of his adult life in Vermont, although he also spent time in New Jersey. And his brother, well, his siblings, three of his siblings live in Vermont. No, three of his siblings live in Vermont. I think his sister lives in Massachusetts. But the place where Bill was really most comfortable was in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, up in the Northeast corner. And I met him, I think the first time I met him was actually at his brother's house, his brother Buzz's house. And the ongoing joke, literally until the day he died, because he and Buzz were joking about this, and I certainly was joking about it with him the last time I spoke to him last week, was that Buzz heats his house with wood. And he has a big wood stove. And so he lives in the middle of a lot of maple, because this is really the heart of maple syrup country. And so there was always plenty of wood stacking to do. And Bill considered himself to be quite an expert wood stacker. But as he got sicker, he wasn't able to do the wood stacking. So, of course, anybody who came in on Bill's coattails was responsible for wood stacking. And so, to some extent, I guess I've inherited some of the wood stacking duties. And at some point, we'll get passed along the wood stacking gloves. But I can assure anybody who's listening in that the next time I stack wood at Buzz's house, it will all be in honor of Bill. So, and that might be sooner rather than later. I may actually stop off at Buzz's house after the memorial, because I have to be in. There are foundation medicine meetings in Boston on the 19th and the 20th of November. So there's not much point in my returning here. So anyway, thank you all for your comments. I've received a couple of other notes from some of the people that listen in that wanted to be that they wanted to really just record their tributes to Bill. I'm just looking at something that Jim McCoy sent, because he and Jim worked together to try and get a BRCA group going for us. And he says, I never shook his hand nor looked him in the eye, but I feel a kinship and appreciation for this man beyond words. The realist in me knows this is part of life, and Bill made a very meaningful contribution to mine. But the real little boy inside me aches. And, you know, Paul, as some of you may know, Jim McCoy is also BRCA positive. And for the men who have been on this call who are BRCA positive, I think Bill was an enormous source of support. Okay, well, let's move down the list and see who would like some time today, and we'll go from there. And I feel this has been a very, very valuable, I hope you will feel too, this has been a really valuable 40 minutes that we've just spent. It's very cathartic for me personally to be able to do this, to express some of the feelings and to listen to some of you express your feelings about Bill. Okay, Jake, would you like some time today?
I don't have anything on myself, Rick, but I do have a couple of comments that might be a benefit to the other guys.
Okay. Dennis Correa, would you like some time today?
Yeah, I'll just have a quick question for some discussion, maybe.
Okay. Dennis Mcguire, would you like some time today?
Yes, please. I have a quick update.
Okay. Ken Anderson, would you like some time today?
Yes, I have a couple things.
Okay. Len, would you like time?
Nothing tonight, Rick. Thank you.
Okay. Larry, would you like some time before you leave?
No, thank you very much, Rick. Not tonight.
Okay. Well, safe trip. If you leave whilst we're talking, safe trip home. And I hope you have a terrific time for the rest of your time in Dominican.
Thank you, but it's not like that. It's like we're going to the Argentinian restaurant here in Dominican.
Oh, so you're going to be there a few more days?
Yeah, for another week.
Oh, great.
Well, maybe we'll see you again. Okay. Easy on that steak, on that red meat, the Argentinian restaurant, Mr. Fish.
You know, my agency was closed for the key days of Sukkot, so took the advantage.
Oh, I see. So now I hope you'll be eating outside then this evening.
Hey, Larry, we saw you without your shirt, then we saw you with your shirt, now we don't see you at all. What happened?
Oh, because I put a shirt on because I thought someone was going to come to fix the air conditioner, and then we're getting ready to start to go out to eat, and then I don't know, I got pulled. It's a long story, but I got pulled away. When I came back, I just clicked talk. I didn't click share, and my girlfriend's here. That's all.
Okay. All right. Well,
Just
you have
check.
fun there.
Can,
Okay.
can we just let's not belabor this.
Okay. Carl Foreman, would you like some time today?
Well, Mark's left the room. She reminded me that the captain has invited some of the people on the ship for an event, which is starting in 10 minutes. But the most important part of tonight for me was the very beginning to talk about Bill and how he's affected all of us, and to share our thoughts and sorrows about his passing. And I'll probably stay up until.
Okay, well, we wish you two a very. You're cutting in and
Yes,
out.
I'm in the St. Lawrence Seaway in between Quebec and Nova Scotia, and the captain has already warned us that we're going to be heading into some stormy weather within the next 24 to 36 hours. So to be prepared, he's done some maneuvers to avoid the heaviest of the seas, but he said we should be expecting maybe 6 to 8 foot seas as opposed to the anticipated 20+ foot seas that we're going to be avoiding. So.
Okay. Well,
thank you all.
We hope you have a wonderful rest of your cruise, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bruce Shrimp, would you like some time tonight? Hey, Bruce, are you with us still?
Do you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yes.
All right, a couple seconds for a quick update.
Okay. Les Shelderup, would you like some time, sir?
Not tonight. Thanks, Rick.
Okay, and Paul Frieda, would you like some time tonight?
No, I'm good tonight. Thanks very much.
Okay. Okay. Let's start with Jake.
Okay. Again, it's just general commentary. First of all, Rick, the gentleman that I tried to write to from Bayer about the darolutamide, you were right. He did not answer. So maybe if you can catch him at the meeting on the 2nd of November, that'd be great. That's no surprise though, because as you said, he doesn't respond to emails. Concerning foundation medicine, we've talked about this before about insurance coverage. I had the liquid biopsy, and foundation medicine and I both thought that I would be covered. Medicare denied the claim. Just for information, it looks like that Medicare said, I don't know them anything, but just be careful if you get the liquid biopsy. I know the CDX, the full blood or the full test is covered by Medicare, but the biopsy apparently is not at this point. Just for anybody who's interested. And then finally, we were talking about.
Hold on that one. So let's just clarify. So we know that the solid tumor biopsy is covered.
Right.
My understanding was the liquid biopsy was not covered, but then you went back to them a couple of times and they said they thought it was, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But you got turned down.
Well, Medicare denied the claim, and they basically wrote it off. They said, you don't know them, I don't know them anything. But
well, when I will follow up with David just for some clarification.
Yeah, don't mention me because I'm. You please don't mention me because as far as I'm concerned, I'm off the hook.
I understand. But I'm trying to remember. We didn't ask David, did we? Because he was on paternity leave.
No, we did ask David, and he said he thought it was covered.
And he said he thought it was covered. Okay. All right. So I will check because we do need. We need to know going forward. We need to know whether we can recommend that men get a liquid biopsy because we don't want to expose them.
Right. That's why I mentioned it. I knew, I mean, for the benefit of other people in the future.
Okay. But
So Jake, you said Foundation Medicine lets you off the hook, so you don't owe them anything.
No, it was a $5,000 charge from Foundation. I got financial assistance from Foundation Medicine anyway, based on my income, and so I wasn't going to pay anywhere near that amount anyway. But then Medicare basically said it's denied, and they will not cover anything. And then they, at the, if you as you know, they say you owe the provider X amount of dollars, and
yeah, Foundation Medicine.
Medicare said you owe them nothing, and the provider has to accept the Medicare ruling. So I'm sure that's going to change with time, and it may have to do with the way they code their, a lot of it has to do with the coding that they send to the insurance companies. And I'm sure Foundation Medicine is still working on getting something for me and other people too. But it's just a commentary for right now for anybody,
yeah.
for benefit anybody that's interested.
Yeah. So Medicare turned the claim down, and you and Foundation Medicine had an amount to bill, but just didn't pursue it.
I don't know if they're pursuing it or not. No. all I know is what I heard from Medicare.
I'm confused again, Jake. Medicare turned your claim down.
Yes.
So how do you know that Foundation Medicine is not pursuing you?
I don't know. I'm sure they are. And like I said, it may have to do with just the coding. There's codes that they have to send to the insurance companies, and
Okay.
maybe they use the wrong code or whatever. But as it stands right now, Medicare says I do not owe anything because the claim was denied. So basically what they're saying is the provider of the service, Foundation Medicine in this case, has to eat the cost.
Okay, that's where I'm having the difficulty. If Medicare turns a claim down, does that mean that the provider cannot claim from the from the patient?
Yes.
And are other people in agreement with that?
This is Bruce. Let me jump in here. It is possible, I'm not sure, but it is possible that when the provider agrees to go with Medicare, Medicare imposes certain conditions on payment. And it is possible that even though Medicare turns it down, the provider can nonetheless not go after the patient, even though you sign a contract. I know when you go in, you sign that, you're responsible for any and all costs that your insurance provider does not cover. The point of the matter is that there are federal regulations, and I haven't checked all those federal regulations, but there are federal regulations that determine if the provider can then go after the patient, quite apart from the contract that you sign.
Uh-huh.
Right. Like I said, I'm sure they're not done with it. That's my understanding too, Bruce. And I'm sure that their foundation is going to resubmit using maybe a different code or something. But as it stands now, there's no charge to me, which is unfortunate for Foundation Medicine, wonderful for me.
Right. So, but then if Medicare had paid something, then you would have been obligated to pay something.
Right. What they do is they'll say, okay, let's say the price was $5,000, and then Medicare would cover 4,000 of that, and then they would pay a percentage, and then the difference in my case would go to my secondary insurance, who would pick up another additional amount, and then I would have to pay the difference. But right now, as it stands, Medicare says it's not a covered procedure. So there's no valid charges exist.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But again, I think that well, I will find out. I will try. I mean, it won't be. Hopefully, well, I can't say this, Jake, because if I ask anything, then if they resubmit and it's claimed, then you are going to be obligated for your portion of the coverage after their financial aid, correct?
Right.
This is Bruce. Agree.
Yeah. So I mean, you put us as ANCAN in a difficult situation because we really have to figure out whether we can tell guys to get liquid biopsy. I don't know how we're going to do that if we don't pursue it.
Right. Well, that's why I brought it up. I mean, I could just, just have not said anything and gone on my happy way. But I know that we do recommend biopsies as foundation medicine periodically, and it's just something that we need to be aware of, and maybe it needs to be clarified with foundation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then leave it with, and I'll do the best I can and try not to harm you at all.
All right. This is Bruce again. I think you have to check the federal regulations, which is that's a whole other set of laws written under the Social Security law.
Yeah, and Bruce, let me just address that. I mean, it was my understanding originally that liquid biopsy was not covered, that only solid tumor biopsies were covered, and that once in a lifetime for any given cancer, because we were somewhat involved as advocates in getting this approved originally, and so we did understand it quite well. I understood that the liquid biopsy, however, was not covered. And then in Jake's case, when we pursued it, we were told no, or Jake was told no, the liquid biopsy was included.
Yes, it is covered. Yes.
And now, I mean, there's no question in my mind that the solid tumor is covered. Absolutely certain that the solid tumor is covered. But the question is, we don't know whether a liquid biopsy is covered.
Right.
That's what we don't know. But I can sit here and tell you all for sure, you can get a one-time test for your solid tumor. Now, the big issue with that is that we have a disease that morphs. And what we don't have yet is the ability to go back 2 years later or 3 years later and see if we have different type of mutations, because that would not be covered. That is definitely not covered, but it's something that I know Foundation Medicine is working on.
Right. And I'm
Well,
sure
and there might be confusion on their end as well.
Yeah, I can say, hey, this is Ken Anderson. You remember, Rick, I had the liquid biopsy from Foundation One. And they originally, I don't know, they had said there was a fee, then they said there wasn't a fee, and I don't actually remember the number, but they ended up sending me a letter stating that there was no charge for the liquid biopsy. I was going to be out of town, so they had to mail me the box and the package.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, last year. Yeah.
Right, last year. So I sent it in, you saw the report, there wasn't much on it. But maybe 2 months later, they send me a bill in the mail for $1,300. And all I did is sent them the letter that they sent me along with their invoice back in the mail, and I haven't heard anything from them. So I don't know. I think the fact is that maybe one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing.
Well, that's my point about confusion.
Right.
that's my conclusion too.
Let me tell you something. Under insurance law, once an insurance company says you don't owe anything, It's very difficult to get that reversed under law.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and,
So,
you know, as far as my own personal situation goes, you know, I had a small percentage to pay anyway. They were going to charge me only 10%, which is, you know, really decent.
right,
But
right.
you know, regardless of whether it's covered or not, and it behooves you, anybody who's interested, it behooves you to check with Foundation Medicine first. And as you said, you know, depending on who you talk to, you're going to get different answers, which is exactly what happened to me. And Rick talked to David Marshak, who intervened, and he said, yeah, it is covered. But again, that's really at this point not neither here nor there. The bottom line, as far as I'm concerned, is a Foundation biopsy or the CDX one even is even better. But the liquid biopsy identified 2 AR mutations that I happen to have, which that I've developed over time, and it's made me non-receptive to abiraterone and enzalutamide and a lot of other drugs. Now, that AR mutation that liquid biopsy did identify very clearly makes me not, you know, it's basically they said those drugs will no longer work for you, and that's exactly what happened. So it's very valuable to have. It's very valuable to know. You know, whether you're getting covered by insurance or not, I don't know. It's
What was the final issue you had, Jake?
Oh, just we talked about olaparib earlier, and this is again, this is not imminent, but niraparib, Zaluga, I think is the name. I may be pronouncing it wrong, but they've gotten a FDA breakthrough deal with the FDA, so it's going to be, you know, the approval process will be sped up. And it may very well be the case that niraparib, which is a PARP inhibitor like olaparib, it may turn out that niraparib is approved before olaparib is for prostate cancer.
Was that, yeah, Zejula is what it's called. Was that status specifically with respect to prostate cancer? I did see something last week, but I'm not registering what it was.
Yeah, definitely, because it's approved for, it's like olaparib, it's approved for other things, but this is specifically for prostate cancer.
So niraparib is an AstraZeneca drug that is sold for prostate cancer through Janssen. Janssen has the license to market it for prostate cancer. I don't know whether they have it for other cancers too, but they definitely have it for prostate cancer.
So you're saying it's approved already?
No, they have that license for at least a year.
Okay. Well, whatever the FDA breakthrough thing means, it tells me that it's going to be, you know, the approval process is going to be sped up because they got that approval from the FDA. So assuming it gets approved for prostate cancer, then I'm thinking that it'll be sooner rather than later, and probably sooner than olaparib is approved for prostate cancer, which will make it a lot easier to get prescribed by your doctor.
Right.
How are you spelling that other PARP inhibitor, Jake, the newer one?
Nirapar, it's Nirapari.
Okay, niraparib. Got it.
I'll put it in the chat window. I mean, it's been on my radar for a while, because I knew that Janssen had a license on it. But I'm not sure how it compares in potency with rucaparib or with talazoparib, which are the other ones. I mean, rucaparib is 7 times stronger than olaparib, and the talazoparib is 100 times stronger. Now, all that means is that the dosing is less. It doesn't mean it's 100 times more effective. It just means it's 100 times more potent. And the one thing that Bill Garesisol said to me on more than one occasion is that he believes that the more potent the PARP inhibitor, the more effective it is. So he thinks a more potent drug like talazoparib, even taken at a reduced dose comparable to the olaparib, is going to work better. That was his belief.
Sure, that makes sense.
So,
but again, you know, getting it approved, you know, off-label is an issue for many of us.
right.
Whereas if this the FDA it does approve it, then it may be, you know, I don't know how long it takes. I don't know exactly what FDA breakthrough means, but you know, the way I understand it, it means it'll be reviewed and either approved or disapproved on a very short notice.
Okay. So I'm
We
going
may
to
have a new.
recognizing that we've got a shorter meeting. Let's move along. Dennis, what's on your mind today? Sorry, Dennis Correa. Dennis Correa. I'm Dennis
Yeah.
Mcguire. Okay.
Yeah, I just a little question or maybe some discussion, but you know, often when I talk to people and I tell them I have metastatic prostate cancer and I'm doing pretty good right now, and you know, and then you look and you start going into, well, there's so much research going on, but it's really all has to do with extending life to some point. But pretty much we all have come to accept that it's not going to last forever here. And so I asked myself this question as to why is there not other research? Is it the science that just isn't there yet regarding, you know, an end all, a thing that a drug or what have you that would take care of every one of these tumors in the cells that in the prostate cancer throughout your body. And I read the, you know, the hot sheet and all these other things about lots of good research on detection and new combinations of drugs and this and that. But really, I don't see, I would like to have a little bit of hope to say, yeah, well, there's some researchers started, but we're still 5 years away. You know, we're at the mouse level or something like that. And so I don't know. Does that anybody else have that feeling? And I look at, you know, the cost of some of these drugs, like the Zytiga, and you know the billing rate, as I've said before, $11,000 a month. Now I don't pay that, but somebody's paying it. The insurance is paying it, and so on. And is there an incentive for these companies to not find a cure, as long as they can keep selling this stuff that's, you know, so highly priced? Nothing personal, Len. I know you've worked in the pharmaceutical stuff, but you know that thought crosses my mind. You know, as a business person, you make a decision so where you want to put your money in your research and so forth. But anybody else ever think about that?
Well, I do have some thoughts, but let me let Len defend his heritage.
Well, I would never want to defend the prices that pharma companies charge for their drugs. There's just no defense for that. However, the idea, you know, there are so many conspiracy theories. This is another one of them that's pretty wacko, that the pharmaceutical industry is deliberate. You know, they have a cure. They know how to cure diseases, but they don't do it. They just want to extend life a few months, and it's absurd. These people, I'm talking about the researchers now, not the marketing people, not the sales people, the people who work in the lab doing the research. They're very ethical. To think that they would do something like that to have a cure and not continue developing it is really, it's an insult to them. to their
Yeah,
integrity.
yeah,
And
I wasn't
yeah, and
really aiming that question at the people at the research level, but more at the higher level in the corporations where decisions are made that do, I think, would affect the work that takes place in a research. Would they,
yeah.
they wouldn't
Dennis,
fund anything?
there's a lot of ego involved among these researchers as well. And they would absolutely love to be known as the person or the team who found a cure for AIDS or cancer or whatever. Yeah, don't waste your time worrying about that. Cancer is just an extremely complex disease. It's extremely clever. It's constantly changing. That's the problem. It's constantly changing, mutating, so that when you come up with one strategy to stop replication, it'll find a way around it. And then you find it's the whack-a-mole thing with radiation. You know, it's the same thing with the cancer. Cancer is constantly mutating, trying to stay alive. And if you continuously block one path, it eventually will mutate to a point where it works around that mechanism and it continues to replicate.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Bill Burhans as an example. I
Yeah.
mean, he was a researcher. He knew all about this kind of stuff. If there was a magic pill out there, he would have known about it and he would have had it. And you know, somebody with his knowledge still ends up dying from prostate cancer. So I agree with Len. It's just bullshit.
I'd like to add something too. I've worked with a lot of scientists in my career, and I can tell you that they have a literal contempt for the money side of the operation. They work for honor, they work for reputation, they work for you know the pride of making a great discovery. And in addition to that, there are a lot of researchers that are not connected with a business. They work at a university or a private foundation. So there are plenty of, you can be sure that the scientists are working as hard as they possibly can to find cures.
Yeah.
Well,
So nothing on the horizon then is what.
well, no, that's not true. That there's nothing on the horizon. There's loads of stuff on the horizon, some of which we know about, some of which we don't know about. Prostate Cancer Foundation is about to have another one of its retreats in Carlsbad. I just heard Joel Nowak and Jan Mannerite are going to be there as the patient advocates. I, by the way, have never, I don't think I've ever been on their radar to get invited to that meeting, but I can tell you that it's a pretty high-powered scientific meeting in terms of the some of the genitourinary oncologists that attend. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, look at this REGN 5678 that we've been talking about recently, which, according to the Jonathan Simons, who is the executive president, the president of Prostate Cancer Foundation, is one of the most exciting drugs that he's encountered in a while. That's what he told Jerry Deans. But Len correctly points out that even if we found a drug that we thought might control prostate cancer for a good period of time, the cancer is going to mutate. We know it does. So why is it that they talk about no chance of cure? There's chance of durable remission. Thank God. I have durable remission. My disease would probably micrometastasized, but I caught it in time. It hasn't gone beyond that. Does it mean that I'm cured? Does it mean that I couldn't go in this year and suddenly find that my PSA is rising? Could do. But cure means it's gone. It'll never come back. And I don't think that is something we can talk about right now in prostate cancer if you have a Gleason 4 or a Gleason 5 in your number. And I don't think that there is any conspiracy on the part of anybody not to find something that couldn't cure a Gleason 4 or a Gleason 5. We just haven't gotten there yet. So I do want to give those of you who have disease that requires continued management, which is most of you on this call, the hope that there are new things on the horizon. I mean, I just look at where we were 10 years ago and look where we are today. And the number of options we have available to us today, including all the off-label options. Because there's a lot of off-label drugs that will work for prostate cancer, but haven't been approved per se as we speak. So yes, there is reason to think that you can keep managing your disease and something else will take your life ultimately. Especially those of you who had less aggressive disease in the first place that has metastasized, but you've gotten good results along the way. And the outlook is good. I mean, that's really what tells me. I mean, when I see a young guy whose disease has not responded, then it scares me. It makes me shudder. But then I see young guys like Dennis Mcguire, whose disease have responded, and I've known those guys do very well on different forms of treatment. And we've seen the reverse, like with my friend Trevor Doherty, who some of you remember. Anybody else want to say anything on this before we move on? I'm sort of trying to keep an eye on the time here.
Yeah, I can add two positive thoughts. One, I recently saw a list of survival time for a list of about 25 cancers. Prostate's at the top of the list. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is I read recently some Israeli scientists think that they will be able to cure diabetes in about 5 years. So, there's a lot of new things happening and a lot of reasons to be optimistic and positive. I mean, you can always make yourself unhappy by raising your expectations,
No, I'm not unhappy. It's just sometimes I get stuck when I'm talking to somebody about my disease, and I'm treating it, and I know it's going to morph into something different, and I'll be looking at another drug, and if they don't have anything to cure it, they're doing research to cure it.
Dennis, I think
well, there's research out. There's lots of stuff out there. I agree, no problem with that. Regarding extending and changing and so forth.
Dennis, I think that's true of most metastasized cancer, not just prostate cancer. This is not peculiar to prostate cancer, but we've got to move on. Dennis Mcguire, tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah, just a quick update and a background first. So I'm on Lupron and Xtandi, and over the past 5 months, my PSA has been rising. Last week, I tested in at 6.5 on my PSA. Had scans at Sloan Kettering last week. The bone scan, there was no measurable lesions in my bone. I had a PET scan with Axamin, and that showed two lesions in my pelvic area in the lymph nodes. And then I just heard back from Dr. Morris at Sloan Kettering about 4 p.m. And one of the lesions is large enough to do a biopsy on. And they want to move forward with the biopsy of that lesion in my lymph node. So I wanted to just get confirmation that that is the right course of action. I know I spoke to Len earlier today, and he believes it's a good course of action.
Len, do you want to just recap your discussion with Dennis?
Um, well, I basically told him that I had a very similar uh, disease trajectory, if you want to call it that, recently with the NIH finding some bone lesions that I had. And then I went to, and they recommended that we do a bone biopsy to confirm that it truly was a lesion, a positive lesion, and it was. So you really need to know that. You want to make sure that whatever the scan is picking up, it's not a false positive. Um, and So I told Dennis, not only is it good to have that confirmation that it truly is positive, but also once they have the biopsy sample, they can do a mutation analysis, which could offer other treatment options. That's pretty much a wrap up of what we discussed.
Right. I do have some thoughts, but let me just defer. Anybody else want to contribute to Dennis's situation? Ken, what would you do?
You know, I just turned on my mic. I would probably do the biopsy only because, yeah, exactly what Lynn stated. I mean, you just want to know whether or not, one, it's not a false something, maybe inflammation. It could be lots of things. The rising PSA, of course, has probably got you worried. Mine is doing the same thing at the moment. I am just getting ready to start enzalutamide, or I have started enzalutamide, so I'll probably have 12 months, but I'll probably be not far behind you as far as searching for answers. And that's really what you're doing. So I wish you lots of luck, and I think that's a good choice.
Dennis, here's my concern. It's interesting. I wasn't even thinking about ascertaining that this was prostate cancer. I guess I just assumed it was. So that's a really good point. You do need to ascertain what you're seeing is prostate cancer. I think it's very good that we're not seeing anything in the bone, that none of the scans are showing anything in the bone. My concern is more about how they do the sequencing. I think it would be worthwhile sequencing, but it's how they do it. Now, Memorial Sloan Kettering has its own proprietary sequencing capacity. And if they're going to do it in-house, I think that's great. I'm not sure that I would want to, well, first of all, let me step back one. Are you on Medicare at this point in time? Do you have disability, Dennis?
I am not on Medicare at this point.
You know, okay. So if you're not on Medicare, then you want to certainly be talking to whoever is going to sequence this for you as to what your obligation is going to be. We don't have time today, but we can do it maybe next time you come on, talk to you a little bit about getting you onto Medicare and what that will take, because Ken certainly has loads of experience. I have some experience. Carl Foreman has some experience. There are a number of folks around here, and it's a bit of a moving target. It was a lot easier 2 or 3 years ago than it is right now. So we're not exactly sure, but we can't have that discussion right now. I think it would be very helpful if you could get a somatic sequencing. Very, very helpful. And in terms of doing that, also check some of the markers that might make you eligible for some of the immunotherapy drugs, like your tumor mutation burden and your microsatellite instability and your mismatch repair. mutations, et cetera, et cetera. But do check in with Morris as to how they're going to do that, and make sure that you're not going to finish up with a $5,000 bill at the end of the day. That he can get your insurance to approve it. And I would not, if it were me, I don't think I would be using my, but you're not on Medicare, but for those of you who are on Medicare, if it were me, I would not probably want to get sequenced quite so early in the disease process if I thought I only had one chance to sequence with Foundation Medicine.
Rick,
yeah.
My recollection at MSK was their policy was if they recommended a procedure and the insurance didn't cover it, they would eat the cost.
Okay.
They don't bill you for procedures that they recommend. And then if your insurance doesn't cover, you're out of luck. It's not like that. Did they ever tell you that, Dennis?
No, I've never had that conversation with them. But I think based on Rick's comments, I will talk to Dr. Morris before I schedule.
But I'm pretty sure he'll tell you what I just said, that if they're recommending any kind of procedure and it's not covered, it's not your responsibility, it's theirs.
Having said what I said, I agree with Len. It would be very helpful if you did get somatic sequencing. Did you have any discussion with Morris about a second GU Med-Onc from Wisconsin, from the University of Wisconsin, Dennis?
I'm sorry, what from the University of Wisconsin?
Finding a second doc, a second GU medical oncologist.
Oh, yeah. So yes, we did have that conversation. And he was happy with the oncologist I'm speaking to there, who is Dr. Joshua Lang. They know each other personally.
Great. Okay. So that probably makes you feel good too.
It does. Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So that means that the two of them can work together on your situation. That's great. Anyone else want to contribute anything to this discussion? Well, Dennis, look, again, keep us posted, but please do have that discussion with Dr. Morris. What the other thing you might want to do is find out if you can get, if you do think it's the right thing to do, maybe you can get it done at in Madison, so you don't have to schlep to New York.
I thought about that, but I'm a little apprehensive because they probably don't have the volume of biopsies in their hospitals. I don't mind spending the money to go to Sloan to have it done by them.
I mean, they are an NCCN hospital, but so I mean, I would think that they're probably doing a lot of lymph node biopsies, maybe not necessarily just for prostate cancer, but I would discuss it with Dr. Morris. Yeah, he may say, "Oh yeah, they have a great guy there, and you can see this, that, and the other," or he may say, "No, I think you should come in which case you'll come in," but you may save yourself a little bit of aggravation.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good thought. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Anderson.
Mine's more of just an update. Sorry, I am a bit mental from time to time, especially today. And the reason being is PSA rise, of course. On Friday, I went in for labs and the results came back super quick, which normally is not the case here. They came back on the following, so I had the labs on Friday and they came back on Sunday. So, and the increase, and I hadn't started because I told my local medical oncologist, a young girl, that I would wait until I returned to Arizona, even though Paul told me to get going on it. And I put him a note recently and I said, pretty much sorry I didn't take your advice because my PSA really took a jump. At least in my head it did. Maybe it's not that big of a deal, but from September 18th, it was 3.10 to October 11th, it jumped to 4.45. So, but honestly, I started enzalutamide on Saturday morning at 6 a.m. and I hadn't received the results back until Sunday night, so I didn't really know my PSA had risen. But it did make me pretty mental just starting this second drug for some reason. Not quite as mental as going on chemo, but at the same time, knowing that it has kind of a window of not opportunity, but kind of a window of usefulness, I guess is what I want to say. I did, in fact, get heat flashes that same day. I took these 4-horse tablets in the morning, and by 11 o'clock that night, I started to get hot flashes. So, and I don't know if I did on that same day, Saturday, I took the pills. I decided to go burn off some stress. So I did a 20-mile hike. And on Sunday, I did a 19-mile hike. And Monday, I was feeling it. But at the same time, it wasn't because of cancer. So,
That's amazing. 20-mile hike. Fantastic.
20.5. So whether or not that's good for me or not, who knows? But the fact is it takes my mind away from cancer, so I had to do it. I guess the reason for bringing it up is what kind of other things should I watch for on enzalutamide? I'm 4 days in. I understand I won't really get results from this as far as a PSA decline for like 28 days or something. Of course, last night I wake up at 2:30 in the morning and I start reading about enzalutamide, which I've read a lot about it anyway, but I had to read it last night more, I guess. So,
you need to keep a hammer by the side of your bed. And when you wake up at 2:30 in the morning, get that hammer and wrap yourself hard on the top of your bonds and go
right.
back to Jake is the first person that comes to mind because he has the most experience, I think, of anybody on the call with enzalutamide. Jake, what do you have to say?
Well, we did talk earlier, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. For anybody else's benefit, first of all, Ken, I don't think the hot flashes are from the enzalutamide. I think it's a little bit too soon. I can't imagine that they would have that effect on you so quickly.
I haven't had a hot flash for 1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I know exactly what they feel like. I used to get them 20 times a day.
Okay. Well, and I, as I told you, other issues are genital shrinkage, loss of underarm hair, genital hair, hair on my arms and my legs. I could enter a swimming contest for the lack of hair on my body. The heat flashes don't bother me that much, but again, everybody's different. Some people respond differently, and it's hard to tell: is it Lupron or is it the enzalutamide? So,
well, the Lupron should be tailing off because I'm like into Lupron right now. I'm running on 2.5 months because I'm getting ready to take my 3-month shot.
Right. Yeah. Now, I found that the side effects of the Lupron, I got used to them to the point where they didn't bother me anymore with time. Hopefully, the same thing will work with you on that. And I think you'll get used to the enzalutamide too. The big thing is that it works. That'll be the key measure for you. And if your PSA goes down, then the side effects be damned.
Right. Well, I get my next labs on the 8th, so I guess I'll know whether or not, it's doing anything, which I'm sure it probably is.
I'm sure it will. Yeah. Good luck to you, man.
I don't know there's anyone else on the call
Yeah,
today that.
it's Dennis Mcguire. Just a comment on enzalutamide.
Oh, good.
I tolerated it better by taking it at night, a few hours before I went to bed, because it is, it gives you a sense of fatigue. And if you're taking it during the day, I felt it had more of a impact.
Well, if I start feeling fatigued, I'll take your advice and switch it up and take it at night. Because I don't think it really matters when you take it, as long as you stay on some routine. So.
We've heard that before, that you're better off taking your enzalutamide before you go to bed. When were you taking yours, Jake?
About an hour or two before bed.
Yeah, we've heard that from it's a really good point, Dennis, and thank you, Mcguire, and thank you for mentioning that yes, it's been mentioned before that it's a smart idea to take it before you go to bed, Ken.
Will do then. That's what I'll do. I have a hard time remembering the evening stuff, but the morning stuff, no problem. So.
Set an alarm, Ken.
I know it's gonna go on my phone. It's gonna start ringing at me around 9 o'clock.
There's another thing you could do, which I tend to do is I leave, even though I have whatever I'm taking measured out. If there's a pill that I've got to take for the day, I leave it out so I see it. And if you've got certain pills that you want to take at night, you could leave them in a place where you're going to see them right before you go to bed. And then if you forget, you'll remember.
Yeah, I use a pill box, so I usually look at the pill box to confirm that I've taken the pills.
Yeah.
And then, so I usually know if I have or haven't taken them, because I usually set them out for 2 weeks. But this is something new for me, so I'll just figure out how to do an evening pill box or something, and an alarm, and I'll be fine. Well, I'm glad to hear there's nothing really as far as additional side effects to watch for. I kind of thought my little bit of foot swelling was from the enzalutamide, but quite honestly, I think it was probably the 40 miles of walking this past weekend.
Len, what would you say?
Was that directed to me, Rick?
Yes, it was. Yes. What was your professional opinion on that?
Yeah, pretty obvious, I think. Scale it back.
That's what. Yeah, I understand. I do.
Sylvester, you have the most wisdom of anybody on this call. What would you say about Ken's foot swelling subsequent to his 2 20-mile hikes?
Yeah. Don't do it. Yeah, I think that exercise is good for cancer, but not to the point where you're creating more inflammation. There's already a lot of inflammatory processes going on with cancer. And so, yeah, a certain amount of exercise to maintain bone health, muscle strength, blah, 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 that's all good. But if you get to the point where, you're creating inflammation.
Okay. Those were 2 extreme days.
All right.
I'll try to do like 10 miles or 15 or something.
How about 7?
7? That's like 2 hours. Doesn't even take your mind off anything.
All right. You're a better man than I, Gungadin.
Me too.
Sylvester, I asked you for your thoughts. What are your thoughts on this foot swelling matter?
I think he should still do 20, but tell him, give Sylvester 10 of them.
Thank you, Sylvester. I knew you would have some words of wisdom on this topic. And it's nice to see you, by the way. We didn't welcome you.
Thank you. I had some visitors and we went out for lunch, and lunch turned into quite a pleasure. So I got home late.
And by the way, we're going to close the meeting before we start the caregivers meeting. So, because we have to separate the recording. We're pretty much working on time here. Let's stop by Bruce Shrimp. I'm sorry, is there anybody else that wanted to say anything to Ken before we go to Bruce? Is there anybody else that had any thoughts for Ken on starting enzalutamide? Okay. Bruce.
Okay.
At least.
I got my 6-month kit from the Mayo Clinic, and that was interesting. I got the blood draw and sent it back to them, and it's continuing to hold that the PSA is less than 0.1, and the PSA is less than 0.1. And I'm also getting my testosterone checked, and that is now up to 12. So it was less than 2 when I started all this, and so my testosterone is coming up, and my PSA is still holding. There was a dip at one point; it went down to 0.0, but it's sort of been holding at less than 0.1. So the docs at Mayo were happy about that. My urologist was happy about that. I am dealing with a certain amount of genital shrinkage, and so we're working, no pun intended, on that. And that's the update that I have. I also have been having some pains in my right shoulder, and it's sort of moving around. And my physical therapist thought that would be indicative of a rotator cuff tear, and I swim every day. Normally I swim between 10 and 20 laps, which in the pool I am is between a quarter and a half mile. And so I'm getting an appointment with my doctor on Friday to find out. My physical therapist thought I ought to have an MRI. And so to do that, I have to go through my regular doc. And so that's in process. And that's all I have at this point. I'm a little worried that the pain in my shoulder might be a metastasis, but my urologist said your PSA is not high enough. So I don't know.
So a couple of things. We'll come back to your shoulder last, but Paul Frieda, your testosterone has taken a long time to recover since you came off your ADT, and we should note that Bruce came off his ADT. I guess his last shot was in April, so was that a 3-month? Was that a 3-month?
Yes, it was a 3-month shot.
Right. So let's say it was probably out of your system sometime around June, July.
Right.
Paul, what about what can you share with Bruce about the recovery of your testosterone?
Well, it's been pretty slow. I think my last shot was August of 2018, so a little bit more than a year, and it's finally got up to about 150, and it really didn't start to move until the middle of this year. It went to 30, and then to 60, and then to 90, and then to jump to about 150. So it's been more than a year, and we're still not at the 250 level, which is, I think, considered the bottom range of normal testosterone. I don't know why. I was on Lupron for 3 years. It's a long time, and just taken a while to come back, I guess.
And you are how old? You're 72, is that right?
I'm 72, yeah.
72. And how old are you? How old are you, Bruce?
I just turned 74.
Okay.
Similar.
Yeah. So, I don't get disheartened. I mean, I know in my own case, I didn't show any recovery in my testosterone for the first 3 months at all. And then it started to come back pretty aggressively. And it got up to a really decent number. I think it got up to about 750, and I think my baseline had been about 560. But then it dropped precipitously down to about 300, and then it came back up again. And I don't think I think it's been up around 700. I haven't measured it for a while. Len, what was the pattern of your testosterone returning?
Yeah, I had also wide fluctuations in testosterone levels. One 3-month period it was 750, and then the next 3-month period it was in the 500s, and then the next time it was 800. So it can jump around several hundred points. And I remember asking Dr. O about that, and he just said, well, there are lots of reasons why your testosterone levels might be rising and falling. I didn't, get into it with him, but that's normal.
Well, except I have a history of low testosterone, and I am a little worried that it's, it is coming up, but it seems to be coming up very, very, very slowly.
Oh, but it's still very early days. I mean, like I said, it took 6 months. I think my testosterone, my shot wore off in February. I didn't register anything in the May, and I started to register in the August. So,
all right.
So give it some time. Anybody else have any testosterone recovery stories to share with Bruce?
I would just like to comment that, first of all, everybody is normal. There's a normal range, and that normal range they give is like 250 to 750, but that's for like a 35-year-old man who was not obese, at least according to LabCorp, my report. So if you're older than that or you're heavier, then the chances are you're going to be on the low end, and maybe not ever. And if you had low testosterone in the first place, you may not ever get up to, Len is not a good example. I mean, he likes to show off with his testosterone. But most of us, I have a feeling, probably were never at that point, even in our best of days.
That's Rick's fault. Don't blame me.
He did bring you into the conversation. That's for sure.
Well, I do have some pounds to lose. I've lost weight while I was on Lupron, and then I bounced up towards the end of it, and I've been having trouble getting rid of it, but I am going back down again. So right now, today, my weight was about 240. It's been as low as 220. So I am trying to get rid of the extra 20 pounds.
Right. And don't forget, again, that range that they give is for a normal 35-year-old male. So as you get older, your testosterone is going to be less just naturally. Whether you had treatment or not, it decreases with every passing year. So for what that's worth.
Well, that gives me some hope.
Now, let me just consult quickly with my go-to meeting technical maven here, Mr. Jean-Pierre Hannum. Jean-Pierre, if I pause the recording now and don't open it again, I don't have to close the room, right?
Yeah, you can pause the recording. The only disadvantage is that it won't record, it won't process until you actually close the meeting.
Well, that's okay.
Well,
It doesn't matter.
yeah, okay. It's fine to stay up. Jake can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning waiting for the.
No. It's okay. You'll do it
It's not a
tomorrow.
problem. I'm kidding, Rick. It's not a problem. Yeah, you can do that.
You'll do it tomorrow. It's fine.
Yeah, you can
It's
do that.
fine.
That's no problem. I'm
Okay.
going to watch the comedy show tonight at 8 o'clock anyway.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We'll stop the recording now. For those of you listening into the recording, we'll say good night. And the next meeting will be on the 21st, Monday the 21st. And the next Tuesday meeting will be Tuesday the 29th. So nobody has to hang up from the call, but we're going to stop the recording right now.